Welcome to the On List. This is part 2 of woody scents. Taking me a long time to get around to doing this. Sorry, ADHD is a thing. The brain wanders like it does. Part 1, woody scents, was episode 247, I believe. So go back and watch that. All my videos should be in sequential order, organized by seasons. So this current year's season is where you'll find Woody Scents Part 1. And like that previous video, I will say in this one that any fragrance I mention, whether it's discontinued or not, don't go crazy, okay? If it's something that you can get and try, then do. If not, then there are other fish in the sea. A fragrance being discontinued doesn't make it better than one you can currently buy. Being discontinued just means that it's harder and sometimes more expensive to get. Usually harder to get, but not always more expensive. It just depends on all kinds of stuff. I don't want to get into, hype and people building things up like they do on the internet. The fragcom is a silly place, as we know. You've got all kinds of weirdos who do things like gatekeep and try and write the rules of the game like it's an actual game. It's not a game. There is no such thing as the fragrance game. It's not a game. And with all due respect to friends of mine who also make videos who like to call it the fragrance game, I politely disagree with you. It's not a game. It should not be seen as a competition. You're not out to win anything. You're just buying bottles of smelly water like these and then wearing them for your own enjoyment, possibly talking about them like we do or whatever, and that's it. It's not a game. At least it's not a zero-sum game anyway. It can be more of a game of solitaire, but you're not going to win against someone. Someone's not going to beat you at this. So it's at least not a game in that regard. Anyways, Woody Scents Part 2. Let's get started with an unlikely choice, right? You know me, I like to pull the weird ones out. So 2023, Mont Blanc Explorer Platinum. Now this one, kind of funny to me because when this came out, this is the second flanker and third overall Explorer release. There's a fourth one as well now called Extreme, which I don't have to show you today, but I have it purchased and on the way, but I don't have it as of this video. When this came out, there was no announcement. If there was advertisement, I didn't see any. Most of the usual suspects that do YouTube and Instagram, I don't even think they bothered with it. Maybe someone like Ashton of GenSense bothered with it, but most of the so-called tastemakers, the ones that try to curate a certain way to be, again, we're hearkening back to the whole concept of there being a game, right? This is what winners do, right? But those kind of folks with their own little cult of personality, they kind of ignore this. And honestly, I didn't even know this existed until I literally stumbled across it in a fucking Macy's. So I didn't even know this existed until it was sitting there in front of me on the counter. So then, of course, the Macy's lady wants to sell it to me, right? She sees I'm interested. So she gives me a tester and I spray it and I'm like, oh, that's really cool. I like that. And, then I went and bought it online. Because of course I did. I'm not paying that Macy's price. Sorry, I'm just not. So, yeah. In stark contrast to this. So, see, what's funny is this, when this came out in 2019, this turned the online fragrance community upside down. Literally upside fucking down. People lost their minds, okay? They burned their own houses down. They drove off cliffs and somehow survived, okay? They were barking at the moon. They went crazy when this came out. And I don't need to really tell you why. I mean, if I do need to tell you why, then you're probably someone who doesn't actually talk to people online about perfume, which you're probably doing yourself a favor in that case. Let's be clear on that. doing yourself a favor by not being engaged with the community. But the short version of that story is a fragrance called Creed Aventus kind of made significant waves, and especially in the online community again. And the only fragrances that challenged Creed Aventus were either clones from brands like Pineapple, Vintage Intense, or some of the Middle Eastern brands had their own clones too, like Armaf and Rayanne Tradition, so on and so forth. But no actual Western designer or luxury brand had really dared go after the Aventus crown. And even though you can argue whether it's a clone or just an alternative, there's semantics there. There's a whole argument that can be made for or against. I consider this to be not a clone. It's too different in my mind from Aventus. But point is, when a legitimate designer brand puts out a fragrance that challenges another fragrance that costs 5 times the price and has a billion times more clout, right? So it's well-known, desirable, and really expensive. And then this little $100 thing comes out that you can buy at any Macy's, any Dillard's, okay? You can probably get an Ulta too. And it's not a clone, so there's no shame. That's the thing. There's no shame involved with buying this. Whereas there would be shame in having Club de Nuit, having one of those, because you got to say, oh, it's a clone, right? It's a dupe. You don't have to say that with this. So it carried more legitimacy for that reason. And that just set the online community literally on fire. Literally on fire. Like I said, it was helter-skelter. It was like The Purge, okay? It was some serious shit. People were losing their minds. And, yeah, I like it. I own it, clearly. Then when the blue one came out, people were excited about this one. Until they smelled it. They were excited until they smelled it. When they smelled it, they were like, oh, it's an aquatic. That's it. The conversation stops there. They were like, oh, it's an aquatic. I like it. I think the, it's called Ultra Blue, the Explorer Ultra Blue. I think it's a nice fragrance. But when this one came out, this one has the woodiness, which is why it's in this video, right? This has the woodiness. And it's sort of the Santal 33 by Le Labo kind of woodiness. And I know what you're thinking, but Derek doesn't like picklewood. He always makes fun of picklewood. Yes, that is true. I'm not a fan of the cocktail, as I call it. It's basically Javanol, some New Caledonian sandalwood, depending on the brand and their budget, but it's usually Javanol, the New Caledonian sandalwood, and then violet ionodes. You mix the violet in there, and it gives you, and tonka. So it's like violet, tonka, sandalwood, Javanol, and you get this strange picklewood thing that, with the Le Labo is. But this one is smoother because it's more on the tonka and less on that picklewood, right? It's got just enough of that woodiness, though, and then it puts mint around it. So mint fans rejoice, but otherwise mint is a hard fragrance to sell, at least to the mainstream, because most people, when they smell mint, they're like, oh, toothpaste, oh, breath mints, oh, something hygienic, right? Even though it's not the case. But having that dry sort of Le Labo or Tamdao by Diptyque, that dry sort of red sandalwood style woodiness with the tonka, with the mint, it's actually enjoyable. This is a really good hot weather fragrance. It's one of the few legitimately woody fragrances that work well in the heat without disappearing under all the sweat, because the mint is what does it. It goes, pushes it out, and I can appreciate it. But Unfortunately, most people in the online community just ignored it. Like, I am fairly convinced that there are still a lot of people out there, mostly like Fragrantica users and, Reddit users who rub two brain cells together to make a spark, the usual compliment bro types, that still don't even know that exists. Still don't know it exists because, like I said, their favorite influencer hasn't talked about it, so they don't know it exists. If the glorious leader doesn't mention it in one of their videos, then it might as well not even be. Might as well not even be. So, now next up in the woodiness race, we are racing to the bottom of woodiness. Not really, but we are. We are going to talk about one that is discontinued now, unfortunately. And it is Tricorn by Caswell-Massey or Massey. I don't know which one it is. Is it Massey? Is it Massey? I guess it's Massey. Looks like Massey. So, Tricorn came out in the 40s. It was actually supposedly the bespoke fragrance for a while of Cab Calloway, who's, if you know who Cab Calloway is, is Minnie the Moocher, all that stuff, okay? So, very famous jazz musician. If you've watched the Blues Brothers movie, he was in that. Later in life, he was in that. He did his little scabby sort of thing, too. That was his big thing, scat singing. But Caswell-Massey sold this to the public, obviously. They didn't just make it for him. But Cab Calloway was a famous user of this back in the day. And smelling this and knowing him and his personality and his music, this fits. This fits him very well. So, what is this? Well, it's a sandalwood fragrance. But more importantly, it's a sandalwood benzoin musk fragrance. So a lot of people who smell this get a bit twisted because they're expecting big Mysore sandalwood, like a bar of Indian sandalwood soap, And again, the people in this community just have this fixation with sandalwood. Like, it can only be one kind of way. Like, if it's not Samsara, or actual Mysore oil or Chandam sticks, God forbid, then it's not real sandalwood. Anything else is like the Right Guard commercials with Hulk Hogan, rest in peace, but anything else is uncivilized, right? That's how they see it. And I really hate that there's only one way. Okay, it's like the movie Roadhouse. Patrick Swayze, another one, rest in peace, but he's like, my way or the highway, right? That's this mindset, this absolutism, and it drives me fucking nuts. Like, there is not just one way to do everything. And there isn't one way to sandalwood, okay? And this is an example of why there isn't just one way to sandalwood. So what they do with this, which is why I like it, which is why it's in this video, is with this fragrance, they put a nice fat sort of civet-ish kind of musk in here. I don't know what actual, this is animalis or what compound is in here, and they put the musk with the sandalwood, and then they put benzoin with it. And they build it up into like this very thick, redolent sort of like oriental accord. It's not quite Shalimar. There's no real iris in here. Not a lot of vanilla. There's some, but it's just a very musky, rich, kind of almost borderline ambery, but not spicy. So it doesn't have that brown sort of sweetness of amber. It's not quite like that. But it's just a very, very interesting fragrance. And I haven't smelled anything like this. And unfortunately, it was discontinued for a long time. Then they brought it back. When they brought it back and they put it in this bottle, it looked like this with a little guy sniffing it. And then it went away again. So when they bring it out, every time they re-release it, when they've re-released it several times over the years, this isn't the first reissue it's had. They always bring it out, and then when they get rid of it, they always cite lack of availability for materials. They're always like, we can't get a hold of the materials, so we can't make the fragrance. Whether that means there's real Mysore in here or not, there might be some. I don't know. But there's something they can't get. And that something is leading them to perennially discontinue and sometimes bring back the fragrance. So, who knows? Ask Caswell-Massey, maybe they'll answer you. Until then, this is discontinued. If you can get a bottle somewhere without paying out the nose, do it. If you can't, that's okay. There are other things in the world for you to enjoy. Another woody fragrance that I really, really like. And one that doesn't really actually get perceived by many people as being woody, surprisingly enough, is the Dior Homme from the 2011 to 2019. So the Francois-Massey black stem Dior Homme, not the Olivier Polge silver stem, which ran from 2005 to 2010, before Polge basically started to groom himself for taking over his father's place at Chanel, right? So Dior, owned by LVMH, decided to kind of take all their formulas in-house. And since most other oil houses that make perfumes for a brand are not going to sell that brand, the formula, they want to continue then placing purchases for the oil, right, the finished product. So the only way to circumvent that is to basically use chromatography on your own fragrance. To take the oil that you bought from your supplier, analyze it, and remake the formula, and then tell them to fuck off. It's cruel and evil, but they do it, and LVMH did it in the 2010s. And when Francois-Massey basically did that to Dior Homme, looked at the formula and rebuilt it, he changed a couple things. Not significant changes. I don't see a ton of difference between the silver stem and the black stem, other than the silver stem is a bit softer, a bit more plush, more vanilla, so it's a bit sweeter, okay? This one, much woodier, which is why it gets to be in the Tell us friends, gets to be in the Woody Scents video. Yeah, see? And when you smell this one, you get the iris, okay? You get the waxiness that the iris brings. And there's still vanilla in here too. It's a much lighter though, more floral vanilla. It's not as sweet, not as bakery as the silver stem. But the underlying tone in this is going to be vetiver and cedarwood with a little bit of dry leather. But the vetiver and the cedarwood really stand out in this, okay? And the only way that you really know that is to wear it in the heat, not the cold. Most of y'all out there in Fragland, right, or Fraggle Rock, or whatever it is you all want to call wherever it is you hang out online, a lot of y'all make the mistake of wearing this in cold weather. Oh, it's a cold weather fragrance because it's a gourmand, right? It's got vanilla in it, so you got to wear it in the cold. Wrong. You wear this in the heat, and the woody aspects come to life, and you get the cedarwood, you get the vetiver, and then you realize how good of a fragrance this actually is when you wear it outside and it's warm. Maybe not like 90-degree heat, okay? You don't want to wear it in the dog days of summer, which we're kind of entering in August, but 70s, okay, low 80s, sure. You can do this, and you'll get that woodiness, and you'll understand why I chose it. Now, you can't really get this bottle anymore. This is not available. There's an original version that's out there that you can get, but I mean, I haven't smelled that one, so I don't know how that one compares to this one, really. But yeah, it's a shame that Dior just keeps reinventing the wheel over and over and over again. Whenever they feel like something's not selling anymore, they replace it with a different thing in the same bottle. On that same token, I could also say that the 2020 version, which is right here, I could say this is a woody fragrance too, but honestly I get more citrus from this than I do wood. I mean, there's definitely some wood in this, but this is a very musky, citrusy fragrance, more of a vetiver fragrance in my opinion. Just my opinion. I do love it though. I know it's not a popular fragrance to love, but I do love it. So now, another woody fragrance I'm going to mention to y'all is this one. Now I also mentioned this in my white shirt video, so this is getting this one's double dipping, but I mentioned this is a nice clean white shirt fragrance, but this is also a woody fragrance. It has ginger, it has notes of rose, a very sort of blanched out rose though, not real green, not real jammy. And then it has this big woody base to it that's surrounded by white musks. And that woody white musk with the tonka and the cedarwood, it really hits the mark for woodiness, as well as a white shirt fragrance. I won't talk too much about it though. I already did that in the previous video. I just figured I'd mention it. Gets a nod. Gets a nod for being woody. Now another one you can also put on your list for woody fragrances. This one is also discontinued, so we're getting another discontinued fragrance. It is the original Lacoste by Lacoste. So technically not the first Lacoste fragrance. That honor goes to the Lacoste by Jean Patou from 1967, which had a flanker called Eau de Sport. So there was a Lacoste and a Lacoste Eau de Sport in '67, perfumed by Jean Curleo. Well, eventually Jean Patou decided to spin off Lacoste into its own brand, not under the Jean Patou umbrella. Still owned by Jean Patou, so still Jean Patou's perfumer, still Jean Curleo making the fragrances, which he passed away recently as well, but he was like 93, so he had a good long life, but also rest in peace to him as well. But he kind of revised his work a little bit with that 67 Jean Patou, that's being a bit more of a musky fragrance. When he retooled it and re-released it in 1984 as just Lacoste, no longer by Jean Patou, he came off with basically this. And this fragrance is a wonderful sort of like, it's another rare example. It's another rare example of mint and sandalwood, actually. It's funny because I just spent forever and a day talking about the mint and sandalwood in the Mont Blanc Explorer Platinum, but honestly that wasn't the first fragrance to do that. This one was much earlier. Now, these two fragrances are not alike, even though they have the same basic core concept, and I'll tell you why. Obviously, the Explorer Platinum is using a much more modern interpretation of sandalwood with that picklewood, as I said, with the Javanol and the violet ionones and a bit of the New Caledonian. This stuff uses the sandalwood that the snobs love, right? The Mysore sandalwood, the Santal album. And it also uses oak moss. So, and that other fragrance does not use oak moss. So just that fact alone, the oak moss combined with the Mysore sandalwood, and then you get clary sage, and you get a different kind of mint. It's not that sort of peppermint-ish kind of mint that's in the Explorer Platinum. This is more of a green kind of mint, more of a spearmint, I guess you could say. And then bergamot as well. And then some sort of like, I don't know if it's dimetol or some other kind of like really soapy kind of sort of opening material that's very specific to the 70s and 80s, like the smell of 70s and 80s kind of just like a deodorant or soap kind of smell. Very vintage sportiness, right, that you don't get in today's fragrances. Kind of marks Lacoste. And this is my little mini. So the original distributor for this was Sofapar. You know, they're the one who distributed it before Chanel took over. Chanel took over Jean Patou, and then it became Chanel, and then eventually Procter and Gamble. But yeah, and then this is my bigger bottle. And yeah, another example of a woody fragrance that has a mint opening, right? A mint opening woody fragrance. So Mont Blanc Explorer is probably the most recent example of that. Explorer Platinum, but other fragrances did it first. Which one do I like better? Well, I don't know. I love modern fragrances when they're done well, and I love vintage fragrances. It's hard to really say. What have I worn more? Well, if we do by a tale of the numbers, then the tale of the numbers is going to say that I like this fragrance more. I logged more wears of this. But it's also not fair because I've owned this longer than I've owned that, so I don't want to be like, yeah, see, I'm a vintage snob. I wear the vintage ones more. I mean, yes, that's true, but I've also had it in my collection long enough to log that many wears. So, got to give the Explorer Platinum a chance to eventually accumulate that many wears. It's not there yet. Okay, now, winding out the clock here, but another woody fragrance, the last one I'm going to mention in this video, because time is a-ticking, but another woody fragrance that I really, really like, that I think is worthy of y'all checking out. It is this guy. It's an Avon, because I gotta do at least one Avon per video, right? This is Avon Signature. The script is real thin, so it's hard to see, but there it is. Signature Avon. And this came out in 2009. So, I think it's 2009, maybe 2008. Let's see. They usually have years on the bottles. 2009. Okay, cool. It's right the first time. This is an interesting fragrance because it builds a tobacco accord. And it uses yuzu and green apple and ginger and bamboo. And then it has some tonka. It has a tobacco accord. And then it has this sort of dry woodiness. Again, it's a bit more of a nutty woodiness, and I want to say that it's cedar wood, but it is just a very good, fresh, sort of spicy, slightly fruity, but not in a sweet way. Fruity, spicy, just very stately, which I know is most people don't think of an Avon fragrance as being stately, but here you go. Also discontinued, but with Avon fragrances, being discontinued doesn't really matter. People don't really charge a ton of money for them, unless you live in a country where they're not available. So Sorry to my European friends and my UK friends. Some of you guys will probably not be able to get this unless you want to pay really expensive like import shipping and hope that it doesn't get confiscated by customs because of all the stupid tariffs and shit we have now. But in any case, yeah, I'm going to round it out there. Didn't name as many fragrances in this video as I did the previous one, but I kind of figured I don't have too many, in my opinion, qualifying woody fragrances. I covered all the best ones in the previous video. There are a lot of fragrances that I could call woody, but to me feel more mossy. Like, let me give you an example, okay? Some of y'all would call this a woody fragrance. And I mean, a little bit, yeah, but when I smell this, I just feel like I'm in a mossy forest. So I'm not smelling the wood of the tree, I'm smelling the bark with this one. So Hardy Capucci, I don't read as woody. Now, okay, here's one I could say. Witness by Jacques Bogart, 1991, I believe, for this. This could be considered woody, but again, this reads mossy to me. So spicy, mossy. So I don't really think too much of it in that term. And then one more example. This one, Dior Homme. You could say this is also woody, and maybe there again, but I just get more spice and lavender. I get more of a fougere accord from this, a slightly more oriental amber kind of fougere, granted, but nonetheless. So yeah, that's it, guys. Woody Scents Part 2 probably won't be a Part 3. I don't think I have enough to do a Part 3 unless I buy more fragrances, which I don't want to do. Okay, this has been the Unlist. Catch you later.